Hi everyone, my name is JIONG. Today I will present my reflection on a child labour issue in City Confectionery. I will briefly share my experience, the ethical dilemma, and how this will influence my future decisions, especially in my accounting career. In this role play, I took on the role of CSO at City Confectionery. The scenario involved a potential child labour issue in our supply chain listed by BUS30031 Health Snack Australia. My role was to respond to the investigation and balance ethical responsibility with the business considerations. At the beginning, I realized I was quite focused on defending the company. For example, when asked about the supplier monitoring, I mainly referred to audits and policies like our code of conduct. But looking back, I did not really question whether this system actually worked in practice, so my approach was more about explaining rather than really reflecting on the issue. For me, the dilemma was not just whether child labour is right or wrong. It was more about how do we respond to this issue while still maintaining the business relationship with BUS30031. On one side, continue the partnership help with the stability and operations. But on the other side, if we don't handle the issue properly, it can harm children and also damage our reputations. So I found it quite difficult to balance these two sides in a realistic way. At first, I think my thinking was quite rules-based. I believe that since we already have the policy and audits, the company is doing its jobs. But during the discussions, I started to question that, like, just because we have rules, does that mean the problem is actually solved? And I realized that compliance does not always mean the outcome is ethical. So this really pushed me to think beyond just policy. So based on that, my final position was to continue the partnership with BUS30031 but under strict conditions. For example, eliminating the child labours, introducing the third-party announced audits, and also improving the transparency. We also suggested supporting the education and community program. I think I learned towards these solutions because I prefer structural improvements rather than immediately ending the partnership. But at the same time, I realized that these actions only work if they are actually implemented properly. These decisions affect different groups in different ways. For children and community, it provides protections and access to education, which is positive. For consumers and business partners, it builds trust. But of course, there are also challenges. For example, shareholders might be concerned about higher costs and suppliers might feel more pressures. So this made me realize that the ethical decisions are really perfect and there are always trade-offs. Before this roleplay, I actually believed that our existing sustainability system were already quite effective. I trusted audit policy and the structural processes. But this experience made me realize that my thinking was very influenced by that mindset. I started to see that there can be gaps between what is written in policies and what actually happens in reality. So this really changed my assumption that systems alone are enough. Another key learning was how different people view the issue differently. The CFO focused more on cost and financial impact, while the investigation team focused more on ethics and accountability. At first, I mainly tried to defend the company, but later I started to consider the community involved and the people affected by these decisions. And I think that this helped me develop a more balanced perspective. This experience linked to several theories. Let's model expand ethical decisions making and recognizing a problems, making a judgment, and then taking actions, which I experienced during the role play. John's concept of moral intensity helped explain why child labour is higher concern issues as it involves harm to vulnerable groups and cannot be ignored. Trevino and Nielsen described ethical leadership as balancing ethics with business performance, which I had to consider as a CSO. The ILO also highlighted that child labour is often linked to poverty, which makes the issue more complex than it appears. From this experience, I learned quite a lot about myself. I realized that I tend to rely on structural systems and complex thinking, but I also learned that I need to question whether those systems are actually effective or not. So overall, I think this helped me become more aware of my own assumptions. Looking ahead to my future in accounting, I expect to face ethical challenges, especially in financial reporting and pressure from the management. From this roleplay, I realized that simply following rules is not always enough. So I will focus on maintaining integrity and applying my own professional judgments. I will also consider the impact of my decisions on the different stakeholders, not just the company. Overall, I aim to move beyond rules following and make decisions that are both technically correct and ethically responsible. So overall, this roleplay helped me understand that ethical decisions making is not straightforward. There are always trade-offs and our own assumption can influence how we respond. And I think this experience helped me become more reactive and more aware when making the decisions. Thank you.